clarity approached, fueled by twist of fate. Linchpin moments that tilted the football universe. A single call that sunk the Sooners. Perfect Florida faltering on the Plains.
Look at this now picked up by Blackman.
Isolated instance that turned contenders into spectators. It was a season that saw perennial punchlines treading on the hallowed ground of the elite. And a team beaten on the field, but compelled to triumph because of what happened off it. Two polls, 6 computers, 1 set of answers. The complete postseason landscape on the Bowl Selection Special next.
Welcome to ESPN's College Football Bowl Selection Special.
The nice, tidy solution was picked off by UCLA when they stopped USC. 8th time in the BCS era that a team ranked in the top 2 of the BCS lost its final regular season game. Only the 3rd time that team lost to an unranked opponent, and by record, you could make the argument that this was the worst loss by a team that was headed to the national title game only to be derailed as UCLA knocked off USC and threw the BCS into chaos. But now the matchups are set and Florida has emerged from the pile. They will take on Ohio State for the national championship on the night of January 8th in Glendale, Arizona. Glad to have you along with us on our Bowl Selection Special, alongside Lou Holtz, who took teams to 22 bowl games, and Mark May, a college football Hall of Famer who went 3-1 in bowls. I'm Reese Davis, and I've watched a lot of bowl games in my time, too. Guys, we'll have Kirk Herbstreit and Lee Corso joining us in just a little bit. And also, over there beside Mayday's shoulder right now, you'll be able to watch the graphic and see every bowl game, every matchup, 32 of them this year, and the most important one, the one that will be decided or played for the national championship, Tostitos national championship game, Florida, Ohio State. Lou, is the matchup the right one?
I think it is, because that's the way the voters selected it.
Come on, I need more than that.
I want to tell you, you give all the justification why they're going there. I mean, you can look at the record, you can look at the conference championship, you can do a variety of different things. There's no reason in this world that you can justify why Michigan's not there. Michigan had a great year, but the voters selected Florida, and there was good merit for it. I agree with it. I endorse it. The game's on. Now, let me say this. I've also been the coach of a team that wasn't selected. And you're sitting there saying, why not us? And it's just like a loss during the season. What you have to do, you have to forget about it, close ranks, move on, give yourself 24 days to complain, then go play their game.
Well, they did get it right, and the right team is the #2 team in the country, and that's Florida, and it's based on what they did the entire season. And I'm glad that the voters waited until the season was over after the championship games to decide to cast the final ballot and taking the entire body of work of all the teams that were eligible. And they thought Florida was the 2nd best team in the country. I agree with them because of their tough schedule, the #1 schedule in the nation, the toughest schedule. They had a championship game, and they won their conference championship.
We're going to go through the entire postseason scenario, and joining us to help guide us through that, Kirk Herbstreit and Lee Corso from College Game Day. Guys, glad to have you along. Kirk, what do you think? Is the matchup the right one?
Well, I think, first of all, like the guys just said, Florida obviously very deserving. Anytime you go 12-1 and you win your conference championship in the toughest conference in college football, you deserve to be in the championship game. We were talking earlier tonight. I still feel it's amazing to me to watch Michigan go 7 straight weeks and being ahead of Florida in the polls until this past weekend when, as Mark just said, I guess it took everybody to go back and look at the body of work of Florida to finally give him the edge over Michigan. I just feel that if Michigan played the way they did against Ohio State yesterday, Michigan would be the team playing in the national championship game because everybody watched that game, said those are the two best teams in the country. It wasn't USC, it wasn't Florida, and Michigan hasn't done anything except probably get ready for exams in the last 2 weeks, and they somehow find themselves now behind Florida. I appreciate the Gators. They had a great year. They deserve to be there. It's just my humble opinion. I still feel that Michigan is the second best team in the country. The voters clearly did not want a rematch.
And they voted that way, and we'll talk about that in just a bit. Coach Corso, what do you think? Did the BCS come out with the right answer for the championship game?
Well, first of all, you're going to use the word fair a lot, and it's not fair. Until they get this thing straightened out where they play it on the field, which I don't know if I'll be around. I mean, I'm kind of old for that situation, but I'm not so sure that they're ever going to get it right when I'm still alive. They need to play the thing on the field. Until then, you're going to have controversy. My favorite thing of all about this whole BCS between Florida and Ohio State and Michigan is I can't wait tomorrow for the USA Today to come out and see how the coaches in the in the Big Ten and the SEC voted. You know, they have to vote now in public record. So we're going to see now where these guys voted and how they voted. And let me tell you something, that's going to be some exciting stuff. Maybe some people will wish it wasn't public now. I'm telling you, I can't wait to see that.
Hey, you know what? Jim Tressel made a move that perhaps Ted Ginn would be envious of. Tressel came out beforehand, and you know what? All kidding aside, he didn't want to be put in this position. He said we're in a unique spot in the BCS standings, so he thought it was best that he didn't cast his vote this time. And one would think that because of his stated preference for conference champions might have hurt Florida. Not even close. Big-time shift in the coaches' poll. And Kirk alluded to this, the change which turned out to be a 66-point swing. Some of it aided by the fact that many of the ballots had Florida number 4 prior to USC's loss. So you can make a big jump if you go 4-2. But it wasn't just the coaches' poll that inserted the Gators in the number 2 slot. Also, the Harris Interactive poll. And in fact, in this one, which is made up of former players, former coaches, and some administrators, Jim Walden, who used to coach at Washington State and Iowa State, in fact, was Pac-10 Coach of the Year once. Old Jim, he didn't have any doubt. He had the Gators number 1 in his poll.
That's how he felt.
So now that whether you think Michigan, Florida, and you know what, let's be honest about it, you're splitting hairs. You look at the stats, put the stats side by side. The stats are almost identical between the Gators and Michigan, perhaps subscribing to the fact, if you believe the regular season's a playoff, Michigan had his chance. Now Florida will get theirs. Gators go to the national title game for the first time in 10 years. Jim Tressel's going to try to win his second national title among the artists formerly known as 1A, now known as the Bowl Subdivision, as opposed to the Championship Subdivision, where Tressel won national titles at Youngstown State. One of the reasons he's going to get to is a very talented senior quarterback. Joining us now, the quarterback of the Buckeyes, Troy Smith. Troy, much of our discussion has been about the possibility of a rematch that won't happen. What did you guys think about the possibility of playing Michigan again?
You know, we pretty much went to the situation knowing that we're going to have to play somebody, and it didn't really matter who we were going to play. Any team is worthy of getting a shot at the national title, so we approached it that way.
How do you think playing someone fresh, somebody that you're not familiar with, will affect your team's mindset?
I don't think it will, simply because that's going to be added emphasis to do everything, you know, and take it to the next level. Seeing and getting new opponents, that means everything. That means, you know, it's new guys, new things that you can accomplish, and definitely playing somebody from the SEC is a challenge.
How much have you had an opportunity to see Florida play this year?
I haven't had a chance to see a whole game other than the one against Arkansas. Just saw bits and pieces of their year thus far. You know, I'm a great and huge fan of Chris Leak. I like his game through and through, and I'm looking forward to meeting him.
And what did you think of Florida's defense based on the Arkansas game last night?
Athletic, all the way around, you know, from their front four, their linebackers, and their secondary. They're very, very athletic. And
what kind of challenges does that present to your offense?
I think it presents the challenge that we have to answer that. You know, we have to come and be ready to play 4 quarters of football through and through, and I know they're going to come and, you know, want to stop our offense, and that's what they've been doing all season long. They've been doing a great job on defense.
Your offense has been so much about rhythm. You guys have been in sync seemingly since the first day. Now you're off for 50 days. How do you expect that to impact it?
I can't say that we've been off for 50 days. We just haven't been able to.
Well, you haven't played a game in 50 days, or you won't. When you play the championship game, it'll be about 50 days since you played a game.
Yeah, until you go through a practice here, you understand why I said that we haven't been off.
And what are your thoughts on the upcoming Heisman Trophy ceremonies? People are saying that you are a shoo-in to win it. How much thought have you given that?
Not much. As it gets closer and closer, I do get, more and more overwhelmed and more excited about it. It's definitely the trophy of the trophies. It's so prestigious in that, the guys that they mention year in and year out that win that trophy kind of, chills my bones because sometimes I sit back and think, am I really good enough to be in these group of guys?
What would you say the biggest difference is in you as a quarterback now as opposed to a couple years ago?
Oh, maturity. Anytime you get into a situation where you can be in the program for 5 years, you have a chance to mature and grow with your teammates, grow with your football family, and that would be the key.
Now, we sit here every Saturday and we scrutinize every detail and we look at the computers and we look at the polls. How much do you guys pay attention to all of that?
To a certain extent. Sometimes you accept the scrutiny and sometimes you don't want to accept it. But it's a part of college football, it's a part of life, and you have to be able to take that and bite that bullet sometimes.
Troy Smith, leading contender for the Heisman Trophy and an opportunity to lead the Buckeyes to a national championship. Troy, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
A dominant season for Troy Smith. Chris Leak will try to answer it. Finish off his career with a national championship. Much more on the title game from Arizona coming up on our Bowl Subdivision championship game. Florida and Arkansas. Chris Leak and the Gators trying to win a title for the first time in his career. Leak threw a couple of third-quarter interceptions, including that one on a shovel pass to Antoine Robinson.
Well, it wasn't real good execution, but a great play by Antoine Robinson.
Razorbacks scored 21 straight points, seemingly had the Gators on the ropes. On a 4th and 1, Florida punting it away, and then Arkansas returned the favor by making a mistake.
I bet you Coach Meyer would have told his punt returner around the 10-yard line, son, don't you feel that ball if it goes over your head.
Reggie Fish lost track of where he was. Wandy Pierre-Louis recovers, and Florida goes back on top 24-21. Then the freshman Percy Harvey, a little misdirection, and you give him a gap, he's gone, Luke.
Boy, just a tremendous effort by the young player. Ironically, Florida had a freshman block a punt, freshman recover a fumble for a touchdown.
Are you trying to say the future's bright?
I'm saying the future's very bright.
Casey Dick firing for the end zone, picked off by Ryan Smith, and Florida wins the SEC title 38-28. Urban Meyer gets doused with Gatorade. And as we've told you, Florida is now going to play for the national championship against Ohio State. Lloyd Carr of Michigan, his team was passed over. Now, before Carr knew the results of the polls and results of the BCS standings, on his coach's show last night on Michigan Replay, he had this to say about the process.
I think it's going to be a great controversy. I don't care who gets selected. And because, I just think that based on some of the comments the Florida coach has made in the last 2 weeks, campaigning strenuously for a berth in the championship game and making some statements about Michigan that I think were inappropriate. I think that certainly is going to stir a controversy, and who knows what that's going to lead to.
And there has been a difference of opinion on our set about who should be playing Ohio State for the national championship. Florida has emerged as the #2 team. Joining us now, the head coach of the Gators, Urban Meyer. Urban, I assume you heard what Lloyd Carr said. What is your reaction to it?
Well, I'm not quite sure. That's first I heard that about inappropriate comments about Michigan. I certainly have great respect for Ohio State and Michigan. I've only seen them play the one time, and I think they're both great football teams. But I certainly, it's an imperfect system, and I think the most important people that often get forgotten in this are the student athletes and the guys that are competing and playing. So there's certainly no disrespect for any school.
During the process leading up, you said that if there was a rematch, that they should come up with a different system and do it like now. Now that the system has worked in your favor, what are your thoughts?
Well, I still think it's an imperfect system. That's not going to change. I was at Utah 2 years ago, and Auburn finished undefeated. Utah finished undefeated. Several other schools did, and I wasn't aware of the whole because it was so new to obviously the University of Utah and new to myself. I think at some point we will see a playoff system. I don't know when, but can you imagine being a BCS selection committee and all the people involved and asked to do a job that really you can't do? And that's pick the top 2 teams in America if they have even records. So I think it's a very imperfect system, and I think at some point in time you're going to see a playoff, maybe a 2-team playoff or 4-team playoff or 8-team playoff, but you could see that happening because this will continue, and next year is going to be the same thing.
Do you expect to be one of the people out front pushing for that playoff, pushing for that change?
No, I don't think so. I think if someone asks my opinion and wants me to get involved, I'm awful busy with my job here at representing University of Florida. I certainly don't have the answer for that. I think that's for the presidents and the athletic directors because it's not whether you need one or it's whether you can have one. Logistically, the stadiums, the amount of games you ask a team to play, and then obviously the bowl experience. The bowl experience is one of the greatest experiences a college student can have, and you certainly don't want to take that away.
Why do you think, Urban, so many voters changed their mind about your team and pushed you into the championship game?
Well, I did follow the coaches' vote this morning, and I think the coaches got to see our team play, and hopefully they felt that our guys played very hard. We play a lot of young players, and I think they appreciate the fact that, when you sit back after the season and realize that you had a team go 12-1 through that schedule and win the SEC championship, I think the country just saw that and had some respect for our players.
How would you describe the emotion when you and your team found out you'd be playing for the national championship?
I can't give you that. This team's been through a lot. There's been transition. There's been guys battling injuries, and we are a relatively young team. To see their faces, see the reaction, that's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I can tell you this, they're very respectful of having that opportunity.
And what do you think of what little you've seen of Ohio State up to this point?
Well, I only saw the Ohio State-Michigan game, and I know Coach Tressel. I know the way that they recruit, which is the most important thing. They have great players. I remember Troy Smith and Teddy Ginn coming out of high school in Glenville. But I've only seen them one time. I know that they're well-deserving of the consensus #1 rating, and I can't wait to get started on them.
How big a deal do you think the layoff will be? And Ohio State has a longer one than you do, but now you've got over a month until you play a game.
I think it's significant, and we've had that discussion already. We actually had 3 scenarios already worked up before the last game: the Capital One Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, and the BCS Bowl. And the #1 thing, you have to make sure these guys stay fresh and sharp, and we throw the ball and we do some things that we have to make sure our guys are throwing and staying sharp, so they won't have as much time off as maybe another program. I don't know that, but we're going to go out and we're going to start on Thursday and get these guys going a little bit. But you want to keep it fresh. You want it to be a reward, and you want them to really look forward to the bowl game.
Well, Urban, congratulations on the SEC championship and making the national championship game. We appreciate you being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Does that man ever smile? Is he ever satisfied? They just won the SEC championship.
That was a smile. You got to see him when he's mad. He's a great guy.
I want to ask you, Lou, Urban alluded to it a little bit. What impact do you think the layoff will have on the game?
Oh, I think it's going to have a very, very positive impact on the game for the University of Florida. Your younger players will make greater improvement from the end of the season to the time of the bowl than maybe any other time during the course of their career. And Florida's a very, very young football team. In addition to that, they have an excellent defense. Their problem's been with the offensive line. They've been banged up. That time of rest, recovery, to put things back in for those younger players, their maturity, everything that happens, it will have an unbelievable positive effect on Florida, and I personally think gives them an excellent chance to win this football game.
Oh, the early pick from Coach Holtz.
An excellent chance.
Okay.
You know, Florida has an excellent chance because of the time that they've got between now and the BCS championship game. Well, Ohio State has an extra 2 weeks, and they've got just as good a chance to get healthy and get those young players ready to go. But this is a balanced team. This team is the most balanced team that Florida has faced this season because they run the ball extremely well, with Antonio Pittman just under 1,200 yards on the season. Big offensive line, averaging 6'6", 313 pounds. Athletic, smart, can move you out. Let's not forget Ginn, Gonzalez, Robisky on the outside. They can spread you out. They can line up in 2 tights, and they can power you right down your throat. This team is so diverse offensively. I think Florida's going to have problems defending the Ohio State offense.
Yeah, and then on the other side, Kirk, Florida's defense, top 10 all season long in the nation, total defense. How do they match up with the speed that Ohio State gives them on the edge in Gannon and Gonzalez?
Well, Reese, I think that's the key, is that the Gators have the speed on the perimeter, and that's what it takes to be able to match up with Ohio State when they go to their empty set 4 and 5 wide receivers. You have to have more than 2 corners. If you're going to try to cover their slot receivers with outside linebackers and safeties, they'll pick you apart in the middle of the defense. If you spend too much time on Gonzalez in the middle, they'll go to the outside with Trubisky and Ginn. And then if you spend too much time on the outside and the inside, they're going to run the ball with Beanie Wells. So I think the Gators are going to eventually be the most athletic, most skilled defense that Ohio State's offense has seen. But I wanted to go back to one thing before you go to Lee. Urban Meyer, in his interview with you, and I assume he votes, and Lou's been through this, he just talked about in one sentence that he's only seen Ohio State play one time, yet he feels they're the consensus #1 team in the country. This is what's wrong with this system, is we have coaches voting from August to December on who the best teams are week to week, and they only see them 1 or 2 times, and it's not their fault, Lou. They're focusing on their team, their opponent, yet we're asking an SEC coach to know the Big Ten, the ACC, the Pac-10, the independents. It's unrealistic to ask these coaches and these Harris Poll voters to have any idea what they're talking about because they don't see these teams all year. Yeah, an excellent point, Kirk. There's no question about it. The coaches don't get an opportunity to see the teams as much as they should. Urban probably will have a vote at some point, but does not, I understand, right now in the coaches poll. Lee, how do you think this game matches up and stacks up? It appears to be a matchup of a couple of very athletic teams, and no matter which side of the ball you choose.
Well, I've had a chance to see Ohio State play 3 times and the Gators twice, and there's a great football teams. There's no question about that. Ohio State has really good speed. They just don't have SEC speed in every single position. That's where the Gators have got a good chance. If Florida can get together and get the ball into their playmakers' hands, they got people that can beat Ohio State. But here's the Ohio State advantage. No question. The place kicker and the punter at Ohio State are 150 times better than those guys at the Gators. And that might be the difference right there, the place kicker and the punter for the Buckeyes in special teams with Jim Tressel. That's my take on the ball game.
And Chris Hetland, the place kicker for the Gators, certainly struggled mightily, though he did make a field goal in the SEC championship game against Arkansas. You're right. You hit it right on the head. They've had a lot of trouble in the kicking game at times for the Gators. Well, Michigan passed over, left out, but what a consolation prize. Now they go to the Rose Bowl to take on another team that expected to be elsewhere.
1979, Michigan versus USC. Charles White looked to extend the Trojans' lead in the second quarter.
With a big fumble. They say he is over.
The controversial score provided the winning margin, 17-10 for USC, and a share of the national championship. Watch the 2007 Rose Bowl presented by Citi New Year's Day only on ABC.
And due to that controversy, Michigan's record against USC in the Rose Bowl, 2-5, and the 2 long-time powers will get together again New Year's Day from Pasadena, 5 o'clock Eastern Time on ABC. The Rose Bowl game presented by Citi. Trojans, Wolverines, both of whom hope to be in the national title game. A couple of great receivers for the Wolverines. Mario Manningham missed 3 games, still caught 9 touchdown passes. Adrian Arrington with 7 touchdown receptions, providing some spark for the Wolverine offense, Lou.
Well, if you're going to have a great football team, you have to have playmakers. When you look at Arrington, you look at Manningham, you look at Steve Breast, you look at Michael Hart. That's why Michigan's an outstanding football team, because they have a lot of playmakers. Let me say this. Let me tell you why Michigan has trouble against Southern Cal in the Rose Bowl, because you're at a disadvantage. I know. I went there with Ohio State. You play Southern Cal. They're used to being home. They have all their friends. It's like a home game. The media, everybody else. You go away from the Midwest. You're out there. You're looking around. The weather, everything else. It's difficult to play Southern Cal in the Rose Bowl. But with that talent, they can do it.
I think it's difficult to play Southern Cal in the Rose Bowl because of Southern Cal's defense, their defensive speed. You know, you talk about Taylor Mays in the secondary. I think if you look at the wide receivers, Manningham and company, they're going to match up well against the secondary, but it's the linebackers of USC. Ray Maualuga, remember the hit against Patrick Collins yesterday? Oh, they can hit Rivers. Those guys fly around. They've got speed, determination. They can get it done. New defensive coordinator Nick Holt has a great scheme for this type of defense and the players as he has. It's going to be a tremendous matchup with their speed against the power and the speed of the Michigan offense.
That was the rare hit that actually seemed to fire up both teams. UCLA, when Calvin popped back up, they answered it pretty well.
My bridge work started like moving around from the old days.
Fillings rattling a little bit. But both of these teams have some degree of disappointment. Lee, I want to ask you, who do you think rebounds better in this game? Is it going to be Michigan or USC?
Well, it's Southern California, no question about it, because the fact that Lou brought it up, they're out there, it's a home ball game. You know, when I was a head coach in Indiana for 10 years, I went to the Rose Bowl every year. I didn't take my team, but I got a chance to go out and watch the game. But let me tell you something. Every single year I'd come back and I'd say the same thing. The guys out there are faster than the guys in our conference. Not so fast, my friend. This Michigan team is a much better team when it comes to speed and skill than the rest of the Big Ten teams that used to go out there and play. So I think Michigan's got a great chance at the USC teams, but I think psychologically USC has the advantage. They're there, it's their home place. Lou's right, it's a tough place to beat those guys.
On Saturday, Kirk, UCLA and Dwayne Walker, their defensive coordinator, did a great job against the Trojans. Do you see Michigan being able to do the exact same thing? Because if anything, could make the argument that Michigan's personnel is better.
Well, I think analytically that's tough to break down. Look at UCLA, and even though they have two great defensive ends in Hickman and Davis, but you look on the other side of this game with Michigan, you're talking about two first-rounders with Allen Branch and Lamar Woodley. So I think the talent favors Michigan, but the emotions that UCLA played with, that was off the charts as far as the energy and the confidence that they were able to sustain throughout 4 quarters. Michigan is more physical. They're a little bit more gifted than UCLA, but will they be able to recharge the battery and get excited? Remember, 2003, I think it was, Michigan went into that game against Matt Leinart, Mike Williams, and a young Reggie Bush, expected to win. And I think that speed that Lou and Lee are talking about, I think USC had about 10 sacks in that game because Pete Carroll brought the blitz from every different direction. So I think by then both teams will be back up, propped back up emotionally. It's going to come down to the speed of the Pac-10 and whether or not Michigan's ready for that kind of speed.
And we'll see that game on January 1st on ABC. So we got another BCS game set, and another team that really had designs on going to the Rose Bowl. In fact, their fans had scarfed up the opportunity to buy tickets to the Rose Bowl. LSU were probably a little bit disappointed that Florida wound up in the national championship game, but a pretty good consolation prize for the Bayou Bengals. LSU just going down the road to take on Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. Quinn Samardzija dealing with that LSU defense, Luke.
Oh, it's a great defense, but that's an excellent offense that the University of Notre Dame has. I know that they're coming off a disappointing performance against University of Southern Cal, but they will play very, very well in this bowl game. It's just great to be able to get down to New Orleans after Katrina and everything else. What a good way to make a contribution to that society, and I mean to the people down there in general. And Notre Dame, the Notre Dame fans will do that, and I'll tell you, they'll come down there in droves, and it won't be all LSU in that stadium, but it'll be a lot of them.
Oh, you bet there will be. You see those teams rolling into the Sugar Bowl against those SEC teams?
I don't care where you go. There's always going to be a lot of Notre Dame fans.
And New Orleans especially.
Anywhere. New Orleans. I mean, there's a lot of Catholics down there. But even we played Southern Cal 19 many years ago. We kicked a field goal to win the game. The fans were cheering. I couldn't tell whether it was for us or them. That's how many fans there are, and there'll be a lot of Notre Dame fans there for good reason.
You thought that USC had speed on defense. They're the 66th ranked pass defense. They're going to go down to the Sugar Bowl and play LSU and Bo Pelini's defense. They are the 3rd ranked pass defense in the country. LaRon Landry, the safety, is one of the most fierce hitters in the SEC conference. It's going to be a challenge for Notre Dame's wide receiver, Samardzija and company, to have a big game, as you say, down in the Sugar Bowl.
You know what? 2 games Notre Dame has played. Not that the other teams they played didn't have good athletes, but with truly elite athletes. Michigan, USC, didn't go well. Kirk, we're going to see the same script here with LSU. If anything, some people will say, as the phrase goes, on the hoof. Nobody looks better than LSU. More of the same for Notre Dame?
I have my concerns in this game. If you're a Notre Dame fan, I'm with Mark. And you know, if Brady Quinn's struggled all year with pass or not, he hasn't struggled, but his offensive line has struggled with pass protection. And Mark's right. Both Pelino drive a scheme. They'll try to put a lot of pressure on Brady Quinn. I think it's the other side of the ball that we've seen Notre Dame exploited all year when they played against teams that can run. And I believe when you look at the group of wide receivers that Jamarcus Russell has, top to bottom, you look at those top 3 or 4, maybe as good as there is, not only in the SEC, but in the country. And the secondary of Notre Dame, kind of the Achilles heel for that defense, I think will struggle mightily stopping the speed. If Jamarcus Russell is on his game, it's going to be another long night for the Irish defense.
Lee, how do you see the matchup between the Irish and the Tigers?
Absolutely. LSU is the best looking in the history of football, best looking physical team I've ever seen with 2 losses. I mean, when you see these guys on the hoof, as you said, you can't believe it. But you know what? They can play, and they're mean, and they're tough. And remember one thing, interesting. The last time they went to a bowl in a dome, they clobbered Miami. This football team is waiting to explode, and I'm telling you, Notre Dame got the worst pick of anybody in the country to play in a bowl team. I would not want to play LSU if I was the Indianapolis Colts. These guys are really, really good on all, and physically, man, do they look good. It's a good-looking football team. I'm telling you, Notre Dame's got the toughest assignment in all of the bowl games, in my opinion. Beat LSU in a home game for LSU.
I don't disagree with you. There are some who say that it was only the schedule that did in LSU and kept them from playing for the national championship. They had a brutal in-conference road schedule in the SEC. The Big 12 champions, perhaps some would think unlikely given all that Oklahoma has gone through this year. They'll take on Boise State. We'll talk to Chris Peterson. And Louisville. Louisville's known as chaos theory, where small variations or ripples can produce large variations or effects on a system. In this case, the BCS and the landscape of college football. Trailing the Sooners by 6, the Ducks seemed to recover an onside kick that would lead to an improbable game-winning score. But the ball hit an Oregon player before traveling 10 yards. The officials blew the call. Had the call gone the Sooners' way, they'd be 12-1 and have a case for making the BCS title game. And if another call had gone Florida's way, there might have been no debate. A controversial call during the 4th quarter of a tight game at Auburn had a profound impact on the national championship picture. An incomplete pass, fumble dispute in the final 10 minutes of the game helped safeguard a 1-point Tiger lead that turned into a 10-point victory. Had the controversial call gone the other way, Florida would be perfect, and any debate about who deserves a chance at the national title would be unnecessary. The Gators were involved in over 1,500 plays this season, but it was a single snap on a Saturday night in October that impacted the entire BCS.
Look at the throw. That might be a fumble. Yeah, they put the thing down. Picked up by Blackman.
Some from Michigan might argue it didn't impact the BCS quite enough. Tostitos Fiesta Bowl is set. It's 2 in Glendale, Arizona, just like the national championship game. Oklahoma is there, and Boise State, the second team from a non-automatic qualifying conference, will get there. They'll have to deal with the Sooner D.
And the speed of the Sooner defense, and Brett Venables, the defensive coordinator, has done a terrific job this year. 17th in scoring, only giving up 15 points a game, led by linebacker Rufus Alexander, 95 tackles on the year. But here's the key, old number 42. Keep an eye on him, Ian Johnson. I know you've had 24 rushing touchdowns and 1,600 yards rushing, but watch out for number 42. Pretty fast.
41.
Yeah, pretty fast linebacker.
But you don't need 20 years of being nationally ranked to have a great football team, and that's the case with Boise State this year. They're an excellent football team. It'll be a great game.
I messed you up. You're talking watch 42 Rufus Alexander, right?
Yes.
I thought you were talking about 42. I had to watch 41 Ian Johnson.
No, Ian Johnson had to watch out for the quick linebacker that has 95 tackles that leads the team in touch.
It takes me a minute. I've caught up now. But see, now you've given the proper advice to Chris Peterson, who joins us now on the phone, the head coach at Boise State. We've got the 41-42 thing all straightened out now, Chris, so you don't have to worry about that. What does it mean for Boise State to get into a BCS game?
Oh, it's huge. It's a tremendous accomplishment. We kind of feel like we've been working for this for the past 5 years, and now the system's been tweaked a little bit to give guys like us a legitimate shot to sneak in there and have a chance to compete against some of the big fellas.
Now, you already had it figured out. You knew mathematically you were going to qualify. What was it like for your team when you told them officially where you were going and who you were going to play?
It was tremendous. I mean, there's guys, like I said, that have played for the last 3 years for us on this team that have been working so diligently and so hard, and just hoping that we'd have a little luck along the way too to have a shot to get in there. And not only our players but our fans in Boise and all of Idaho are just they're ecstatic, and it's just a great time to be a Bronco.
Now, the last time the team from a non-automatic qualifying conference made it was Utah, and they took on a Pittsburgh team, good team, but not one of Pitt's vintage teams. You guys are drawing Oklahoma, 11 wins, just a hair away from being one of the one-loss teams. What do you think of playing the Sooners?
Well, the good news is we get to go to a great bowl game. The bad news is we got to play a great team in Oklahoma. You know, we have tremendous respect for those guys, and really with a call here or there, those guys could be playing for the national championship as well. So we know we have a daunting task in front of us. But you know, we got some good competitors on our team, and they will compete well, and they'll represent our school well.
Well, Chris, you set the bar pretty high as a first-year head coach. You know they're going to want even more after this, right?
Yeah. We just went to a little rally, and they were all fired up. And I said, would you be feeling the same if we were 6-6? And everybody kind of went silent. So I think I know what it's all about.
Hey, Chris, congratulations. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Chris Peterson, the head coach at Boise State. You know what? First year, 12-0. Tough to go anywhere from there, huh?
I think that's awesome.
It is. It's been a great run for Boise State. FedEx Orange Bowl is going to match another newcomer, perhaps even more unlikely than Boise State getting to a BCS game. What a job by Jim Grove and Wake Forest, champions of the ACC. They'll take on Big East champion Louisville in Fort Lauderdale on January 2nd. And the Cardinals quarterback's now healthy.
And coming off that knee injury, he struggled a little bit, but now he's hitting on all cylinders. He completed 63% of his passes. Colby Smith picked up the running attack, but Brian Brown found his #1 target, Mario Urrutia, the entire season. This is an offense that's hard to stop, particularly at home, but on the road they struggle a little bit. But I think they're going to be able to put up a lot of points on Wake Forest. Wake Forest defense is good, but I don't think they've seen an offense like Louisville's.
If they put up a lot of points, they're going to win, because Wake Forest won't put up a lot of points, but they do know how to win. And I can't say enough great things about the job Coach Grove done at Wake Forest, but he also did a great job at Ohio U. What's going to be a little bit different for Louisville is they are now going to be the hunted rather than the hunter. When they went out to the Fiesta Bowl several years ago under Howard Schnellenberger and beat the University of Alabama, caught everybody's attention. Now, Wake Forest has Louisville zeroed in. They will play Louisville very, very well, but Louisville's an excellent team.
Yeah, Wake Forest has been able to get it done. Red zone defense. They give up a lot of yards, opportunistic. They've made plays, and they shut down Georgia Tech in the ACC championship game. But, Kirk, it will be a different mindset for both of these teams, and it's fair to wonder how Wake Forest will react on the big stage.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the one thing that they have going for them is something that Coach Holtz talked about, and that is the leadership and the belief. You know, when this season started, and maybe even through September, there are very few people outside of that program that thought they would have an opportunity to get to the ACC championship game and eventually a BCS bowl game. And anybody who's been around football, and especially team sports, knows when people doubt you on the outside and you have success, that has a lot to do with adding fuel to the fire and all of a sudden a belief that you're going to find a way to win the football game. So on paper, Louisville, huge advantage, but the intangibles advantage goes to Wake Forest. Will that be enough of an equalizer in that game? You know, we'll have to wait and see. I'm looking forward to seeing that matchup.
And, Lee, I'm sure that the growth of the Louisville program and arriving on this big stage is certainly warms your heart to a large degree.
Yeah, I was there. That was my first head coaching job at the University of Louisville. I was there for 4 great years, and I really did appreciate those guys giving me a chance. But let me tell you something. Old Wake Forest is a nice football team, but they ain't never seen the firepower they're going to see from the University of Louisville. They got wideouts. They got guys that can run. They got athletes in every position. If, and it's a big if Wake Forest can hang in there to the first quarter, because I think Louisville's going to come out and smoke them, then they got a chance, and this is why they got a chance. Great experience. I brought this stat up because, to me, it's the most astounding stat I've heard in years. Wake Forest, and that recruited 126 players. They redshirted 114 of them. They have 10 fifth-year starters in the starting for them. They got experience, and that's why they win all those close games. They won 5 games of 7 points or less because of that senior leadership. But that senior leadership ain't going to help them when they start throwing that ball all over the place. Woo! Louisville can score against anybody.
No question, that's been part of Jim Grobe's philosophy, the experience you mentioned. He wants to build the players. Some lightly recruited guys have turned into champions. Great Cinderella story in college football, perhaps the best since Northwestern emerged and went to the Rose Bowl. How entertaining is the Holiday Bowl year in and year out? Fighting Texas Aggies going to get challenged by the Texans.
The ball is caught by Denmark. NC State goes on top by 1. 34 seconds left. Graham Harrell again looking. First down, going for the bomb into the near side corner. It is up. It is caught. Touchdown! What a catch made. Robert Johnson. This is the game right here. They've got to go in. They hand off up the middle, and Iowa holds them and wins. Iowa with a great goal line defense wins it 20-13 in the second overtime.
Go to Pontiac.com/NCAA and view the biggest plays from the season. Each week, the 3 with the lowest vote totals will be eliminated until we get to the 4 finalists. The school getting the most votes will receive a $100,000 scholarship from Pontiac.
In the Pacific Live Holiday Bowl, year in and year out, one of the more entertaining games of the entire bowl season. Cal and Texas A&M, the Aggies riding high after knocking off Texas. Now, here comes Cal with all of those dangerous offensive weapons.
Well, they do have some. You can start off here with Deshaun Jackson. I mean, just a tremendous receiver. 54 receptions, 9 touchdowns, plus probably the best punt returner in college football. Has 4 run back for a touchdown. Then you have Marshawn Lynch, outstanding. Averages 103 yards a game, 6.1 per carry, 9 touchdowns. I mean, they have tremendous talent. Nate Longshore, Justin Forsett. They're very, very talented, obviously.
Got a couple of questions about this Cal team, though. The first one is, will they wear those mustard-colored uniforms? I'm hoping the answer is no. And, Kirk, perhaps the more important question, which Golden Bear team will actually show up? The one that's looked great at times or the one that flopped around against Stanford on Saturday?
That's a great question, and you wonder how the layoff will affect them. The one thing, Reese, that we know as far as the athletic ability, as far as Cal is concerned, and you just heard Coach talking about it there, I'm looking forward to seeing Marshawn Lynch and Deshaun Jackson, and an opportunity again for America to see the athletic ability there and the speed and how explosive they can be on that side of the ball. And all of a sudden, I love the story with Texas A&M. Of course, the biggest win, I think, in Coach Fran's era at this point against the Longhorns in Austin. Can they use that? And this is important. This is a classic bowl game, and why these next-tier bowl games are important. Spin it forward into 2007. You beat Texas. You beat Cal. Boy, oh boy, the offseason conditioning program leading into spring ball and summer camp. This is a huge game for Texas A&M, and there's a lot at stake for both teams, but especially Coach Fran and the Aggies.
That gave Texas A&M a little something to hold on to in the Coach Fran era as well, and Stephen McGee is a leader there, so they have an opportunity, as you said, to build on it. Texas A&M going to the Pacific Live Holiday Bowl. Meanwhile, Texas, after that, is left to go to the Alamo Bowl in San Antonio. Great trip, entertaining game against arguably one of the more disappointing teams in America this year. Iowa is 2-6 in the Big Ten, going back to the Alamo Bowl, and both teams trying to right themselves and wondering to see if Colt McCoy, how healthy he's going to be.
Well, the offensive line will do a better job protecting him, I'm sure, in this bowl game. Everybody be healthy, but 6'4", 220 pounds. Sweet. Live is sweet in this passing offense. He gets help from Billy Pittman and Quan Crosby. They know how to run the ball with Jamal Charles. They can throw the football. They're a very balanced offense. That will be the challenge in this game for Iowa.
Texas and Iowa, that's on December 30th. Now, Kirk, Texas, obviously, this is not what they had in mind for the bowl season, and Iowa's been disappointing. What's at stake here?
Well, I think there's, again, I like these. I know that, you know, Chris Fowler and other people who are cynics and they want to play off, they don't like these bowl games. I love the bowl games because of the direction of non-conference football back in August and September. Very rarely do you get a chance to see Big Ten, SEC, Big Ten, Pac-10, Pac-10, SEC. The intersectional matchups are kind of a thing of the past. So when you see these kind of bowl games, I really believe there's a lot at stake, not only for the teams, but the conferences. And I'm really wondering how Texas will show up emotionally when they had aspirations of going back-to-back for a national championship. They've got injuries to deal with, and the team that they're playing has been brutal. Maybe one of the biggest disappointments in the country, the Iowa Hawkeyes. And keep this in mind in this game. You have Drew Tate, who is a Texan, having an opportunity to finish his career against the Texas Longhorns. You know that'll catch his attention.
No doubt. Mayday and I saw him play in the high school All-American game before he went off to Iowa, and now he comes back to that same arena to finish his career. Talk to you in just a little bit, Kirk. Cotton Bowl in Dallas. Oh, this could be a honey of a matchup. Auburn and Nebraska. Nebraska's had its way with teams against the SEC. They're going to a January Bowl for the first time in 5 years.
The question is, will Tommy Tuberville have his team ready to play in a bowl game this year? Last year, they